Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library, and I'm here to continue reading to you from Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede. This is the first book in the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, and it's published by Scholastic, who've been kind enough to let us read it to you today. We're going to pick up with chapter 13. We're getting very close to the end, but first we'll do a quick recap. So just before this, Kazul had been made very sick by some smoke from a dragon's bane plant that Cimarine had found that the wizards had been skulking around. Before they could warn anyone, unfortunately, the king of the dragons, King Tokaz, was killed by some dragon's bane in his tea, or his coffee, and the trial for the new king had started. Cimarine had met up with Alienora, one of the other princesses, who had heard something strange in the dining room, which is when Cimarine realized that she had accidentally left the Stone Prince there. The Stone Prince let them know that he had overheard the wizards talking to Alienora's dragon, Warog, which meant that the person that was probably trying to cheat with the wizards was Warog. Now let's find out what happens. Chapter 13, in which Alienora discovers an unexpected use for soap and water, and Cimarine has difficulty with the dragon. Antrel looked past Cimarine and Alienora as if they were not there, and spoke directly to the Stone Prince. I told Father that someone was listening. He won't be happy when he finds out that I was right, but I bet he'll feel better when I tell him I've taken care of things. He might even let me have the first look into the king's crystal once Warog gives it to us. So that's what you're after, Cimarine said. Antrel favored her with a superior smile. Quite right, Princess Cimarine. The king's crystal will show us the whereabouts of every piece of useful and interesting magic in the world. All we have to do is go out and pick it up. Somehow I don't think it will be that easy, Cimarine murmured. We knew Tokaz would never give it to us, but Warog will as soon as he's king of the dragons. He'll have to, or we will tell everyone how we were the ones that made sure that he was the new king. Of course, we can't afford to have anybody around who might make awkward revelations. I doubt the dragons will listen to a couple of hysterical princesses, but he, Antrel pointed at the Stone Prince, will have to go. What are you going to do? Alienora demanded. She was plainly frightened, and Cimarine could see that her knuckles were white with the force of her grip on the handle of the scrub bucket. Oh, gravel seems appropriate, don't you think? Antrel said. No one will notice a few more rocks around here. Ought I to be taking this person seriously? The Stone Prince said in a rather doubtful tone. You'd better if you don't want to end up as a lot of little pebbles, Alienora answered. She still sounded frightened, but she seemed to be getting a grip on herself. He's a wizard. You wouldn't be talking about gravel if you were the one that had to sweep the floor, Cimarine said to Antrel. She stepped forward as she spoke, hoping to get between Antrel and the Stone Prince before Antrel noticed what she was doing. She didn't think Antrel was a good enough wizard to do any real harm, but there was no point in taking chances. Stay where you are, Princess Cimarine, Antrel commanded. I will deal with you in a moment. Must you be so theatrical? Cimarine said. Theatrical? You think I'm being theatrical? Antrel said furiously. I am simply showing a proper respect for the importance of this moment. You're showing off, Cimarine said flatly, and you're not doing it very well. He doesn't sound much like a wizard to me, the Stone Prince said. Is he always like this? Enough! Antrel cried and raised his staff. Light shimmered along its length and began to gather at the low end. Grinning wolfishly, the wizard tilted the staff, aiming it towards the Stone Prince. Stop that, Alienora said. Antrel ignored her. I said stop it! Alienora shouted and threw her bucket at Antrel's head. Alienora's aim was off. The bucket hit Antrel's shoulder. A bolt of fire shot up from the end of his staff and whizzed between Cimarine and the Stone Prince to strike the fire wall with a whumping noise and a shower of spark. Antrel staggered and slipped in the cascade of soapy water and fell over the bucket, dropping his staff in the process. Cimarine darted in and kicked Antrel's staff out of his reach. He stared up at her from a mount of soggy silk and soap suds. You can't do this to me, he shrieked. Something in his voice made Cimorine and her friends look more closely. Eleanor's eyes went wide, and Cimorine blinked in surprise. He's collapsing, Eleanor said in a stunned voice. He's melting, Cimorine corrected her. I can't be melting, Andrel cried. I'm a wizard. It's not And his head disappeared into a small brown puddle, and his cries stopped. There was a moment of astonished silence. I thought it was witches who melt when you dump water over them, the Stone Prince said at last. It is usually, Cimorine said. What on earth did you put in that bucket? Just a little water and soap and some lemon juice to make it smell nicer, Eleanor said. Said Cimorine, thinking hard. I bet there's a simpler way of melting wizards, but we don't have time right now to figure out what it is. How many buckets can you get a hold of in a hurry? Buckets? Eleanor said. 2, counting this one. And I suppose I could borrow one from Halana. That's 3. I've got 2 in the kitchen, and I expect the iron kettle is big enough. That's 6 altogether, 2 for each of us. You will help, won't you? Cimorine asked, turning to the Stone Prince. Of course, the prince assured her. Help with what? Stopping these wizards, Cimorine said. We can't let them make Wrede the next king of dragons by trickery. I don't see how we could stop them, Eleanor said. We can't possibly get to the fort of the Whispering Snakes before the trial starts, and even if we could, we don't know where the wizards would be hiding. If we tell the dragons that Wrode's trying to cheat, they'll stop the ritual, Cimorine said with more confidence than she felt. That will give us time to find the wizards. And I've got a way to get us to the ford. You start collecting buckets. I'll meet you at your place after I get the things I need from Kazul's. What about... Eleanor gestured with distaste at the wet, messy lump of robes in the center of the puddle that was all that remained of Aunt Terrell. We'll clean it up when we get back, Cimorine said. This is more important. Eleanor nodded. The 3 left the banquet room. The Stone Prince decided to accompany Eleanor since he was not a fast walker, and Cimorine had further to go. Cimorine left them when they reached the main tunnel and ran back to Kazul's cave. Then she went straight to her room and opened the drawer where she kept odds and ends. In the back left corner, carefully wrapped in a handkerchief, were the 3 black feathers that she had taken beneath the left wing of the bird that she had killed in the enchanted forest. She shoved the whole packet into her pocket without bothering to unwrap it, and then went on to the kitchen to collect her buckets. There she hurried through the tunnels to Wrode's cave, where Eleanor and the Stone Prince were waiting. When Cimorine arrived, she found the Stone Prince pumping water to fill Eleanor's 3rd bucket, while Eleanor mixed soap and lemon juice into the 2nd. Cimorine set her pots and pails next to the pump and went to help Eleanor. Now what? Eleanor said when the buckets were full of cleaning mixture. Cimorine reached into her pocket and dug out the package. Gently she unfolded the handkerchief and removed one of the feathers, noticing as she did that the packet also contained the pebble that she had picked up in the caves of Fire and Night. We'll each take 2 buckets. Can we still link elbows without spilling too much? Eleanor and the Stone Prince looked at each other, shrugged, and picked up 2 buckets each. Cimorine took the last bucket and the iron pot, holding the handle of the pot with only 3 fingers so that she could keep a grip on the feather with her thumb and her forefinger. A series of awkward maneuvers followed as Eleanor and the Stone Prince tried to link elbows with Cimorine without losing their balance or dropping one of the buckets. In the process, Cimorine's skirts got smoked. It's a good thing I'm not a wizard, Cimorine said. Ready? Here we go. She twisted her hand towards the edge of the iron pot and let go of the black feathers. I wish we were at the fort of the Whispering Snakes, she said as the feather fell, and the room dissolved around them. They materialized at the very edge of a river, on the flat, narrow rock that jutted out over the water, and Eleanor immediately slipped on the wet stone. If the Stone Prince had not been so solid and heavy, all 3 of them would have fallen into the river. As it was, it took Cimorine and Eleanor several seconds to regain their balance. When she was finally sure of her footing, Cimorine breathed a sigh of relief and quickly looked about her. The fort of the Whispering Snakes was crowded. Dragons of all sizes and shades of greens lined the bank of the river filled the spaces beneath the towering trees of the enchanted forest. On the far bank, a pale dragon was poring over a parchment list that Cimorine thought she remembered seeing during one of the many errands she had run the previous night. All of the dragons seemed to be talking at once, and none of them noticed Cimorine and her friends. "Hello, dragons!" Cimorine shouted, trying to make herself heard above the noise. "Here now, what's all this?" An olive green dragon looked at the bank, demanding, turning. Someone's trying to sneak a look at the trials. Sneaks, hissed a soft but nonetheless clearly audible voice from somewhere near Submarine's feet. Submarine jumped and looked down, but though she craned her neck to see all around her, she couldn't find the second speaker. Get rid of them before Trum comes back with a Colin Stone, another dragon advised. We aren't trying to sneak in, and we don't care about watching the trials, Submarine said, wishing she dared to look around for Kazul. We came to warn you about the wizards. Wizards, the soft voice echoed. Wizards, the olive green dragon said skeptically. There aren't any wizards here. No, but they figured out some way of interfering with your choice of the next king, Submarine said. They're hiding somewhere. You have to put off the trials with Colin Stones until we can find them and stop them. If you'll just tell Kazul we're here. Put off the trials? The olive green dragon interrupted. Impossible. They've been underway for half an hour. We can't just stop in the middle. Who are all you people anyway? A flicker of motion caught Submarine's eye, and she looked down just in time to see a thin red snake dart from one clump of weeds to the next. Sneaks, whispered the soft voice an instant later. Sneaks and wizards. Wasn't asking you, the dragon said, severely in the general direction of the snake. And whatever they are, they certainly aren't wizards. They look like somebody's princesses to me, a blue-green dragon said. Pity that. It would be so much simpler to eat them and get them out of the way. Are you sure? Said a third dragon. The one on the end doesn't look like a princess. I'm beginning to think this wasn't such a good idea, the Stone Prince said. He may not be a princess, but he doesn't look edible either, the blue-green dragon pointed out. And these two definitely are princesses. You can't go eating them out of hand. Princesses, hissed the voice from under the rock. Oh, princesses, the olive green dragon said. No wonder they're so full of wild tales. It's true, Submarine said desperately. If you don't believe us, take us to Kazul. She will. I can't do that, the olive green dragon said. Kazul's third in line now, after Marzan and Warog. You can't talk to people that are that close to making their attempt with a stone. It would distract them. Warog, Alienora said. Warog's next in line? Yes, he should be starting any minute now, said the olive green dragon. Then comes Marzan, and then Kazul. I don't expect it will take long, though. No one's carried the stone for more than a mile or two. But I'm Kazul's princess, Submarine said. I don't care who you are, the dragon replied crossly. You can't talk to Kazul till she's done with her turn. That will be too late, Submarine cried. You don't understand. Warog and the wizards. I've had enough of your wizards, the olive green dragon said. You're a confounded nuisance, and you ought to be not be pushing your way in here when you're not wanted. Go away. Submarine, what are we going to do? Alienora said, as the olive green dragon turned and stopped determinedly away. At Hero School, we were always taught if you couldn't persuade anyone to help you, it meant that you were supposed to do something, something by yourself. The Stone Prince said, and we are prepared. He lifted one of the buckets slightly. But we don't know where the wizards are, Alienora said. We have to find them before we can stop them, and there isn't time. Stop the wizards, whispered the soft voice. That's the first sensible thing you've said since we got here, Submarine said, to the hissing whisper. Can't you just wish to be where the wizards are? The Stone Prince asked Submarine. No, you need to have knowledge of where you're going, or the spell doesn't work, Submarine said. For a moment, all three were glumly silent. Submarine stared at the water, remembering how and where she had gotten the feathers. Suddenly, she raised her head. We may not know where the wizards are, but I bet we know someone who can find out. Hold this for a second. Submarine handed one of her buckets to Alienora, then dug out the packet of the feathers. She pulled the second feather from the packet and grabbed Alienora's elbow. Hold tight, everybody. I wish we were at Morwen's house, Submarine said, and dropped the feather. The scenery shifted abruptly, and they were standing on Morwen's porch. The house was just as tidy-looking as Submarine remembered, and the porch floor gleamed as if it had been washed. A black and white cat, startled by their sudden appearance, fell off the porch railing. 4 others left off washing themselves to stare at Submarine with unwinking green and yellow eyes. I need to talk to Morwen, Cimmerian said to the cats. It's an emergency. A lean, tiger-striped cat rose and oozed through the crack in the door. Cimmerian unwound herself from Alienora and the stone prince and set her buckets on the porch floor. I hope this works, she mutters to herself, as Alienora and the prince placed their buckets beside hers. Chapter 14, in which the wizards try to make trouble, and Cimmerian does something about it. The door of the cottage opened, and Morwen stepped out. What sort of emergency? She asked. She studied Alienora and the stone prince for a moment, and then peered at Cimmerian over the tops of her glasses, and added with some severity, I hope you weren't referring to his predicament. He may well find it an inconvenience, but it certainly isn't an emergency. Not by my standards, anyway. No, said Cimmerian. I was talking about the wizards. They've poisoned the king of the dragons, and now they're trying to interfere with Colin Stone so that Warog will be the new king. We have to stop them, but we don't know where they are, and Warog's going to try to carry the stone at any minute. Can you find them for us? Morwen blinked twice and shoved her glasses back into place with her forefinger. I see, you said. You are right. It is an emergency. I'll do what I can. But if you don't tell me the whole story later, when there's a bit more time, I shall turn you all into mice and give you to the cats. Wait here. As she spoke, Morwen disappeared into the house. She reappeared a moment later, holding a small mirror and muttering over it. Colin Stone, she said, and breathed on the glass. She looked up. Any wizard in particular? Zemnar, the head wizard of the Society of Wizards, Cimmerian said, wishing Morwen would go faster, but knowing that she couldn't. I should have guessed, Morwen said. She turned back to the mirror. Zemnar, she said, and breathed onto the glass once more. Then she motioned to Cimmerian to come and look. Cimmerian obeyed, and Alienora and the stone prince crowded closely behind her. The mirror showed a blurry, wavering picture of the ford of the Whispering Snakes. As Cimmerian watched, the picture moved slowly along one bank of the river, past the waiting dragons and the immense trees of the enchanted forest. Can't it go any faster? Alienora whispered. There's no need to whisper, and no it can't, Morwen said. Not if you want to be sure of finding those wizards of yours in the first try, and it doesn't sound as if you had any time to waste on mistakes. The picture in the mirror continued to creep along the bank. Cimmerian pulled the third and last feather out of her pocket and watched nervously as she brushed it across her fingers. What's that? The stone prince said suddenly. The mirror picture stopped and then moved up the bank, away from the river, towards a thicket of blackberry brambles. Cimmerian saw the tip of a wooden staff peeking up above the thicket. Tensely she waited for the mirror to show them the far side of the brambles. It's them, Alienora said. She sounded frightened and excited at the same time. Oh dear. Cimmerian took a good look at the picture in the mirror. 5 wizards were standing in an opening behind the blackberry thicket, leaning on their staves and looking at the sky. Suddenly one of the wizards pointed. The others peered upward, nodded, and raised their staffs. Get the bucket, Cimmerian said. Cats scattered in all directions as the stone prince pounded across the porch behind Cimmerian and Alienora. Hang on, here we go. I wish... Not without me, you, Morwen said, grabbing Cimmerian's shoulder. We were at the blackberry thicket where the wizards are, Cimmerian said, and dropped the feather. Don't, Morwen finished as the porch winked out and was replaced by blackberries. The 5 wizards were standing in an arc just in front of the bramble. Each of them held its staff so that the lower end was about a foot off the ground, pointing at something hidden in the moss at their feet. An unpleasant yellow-green light dripped from the end of the staff, and the moss where the wizards were standing was brown and dead. The wizard's back were towards Cimmerian and her friends. Now! Cimmerian cried. As the wizards began to turn, she set one of her buckets on the ground and lifted the other in both hands. Taking careful aim, she flung the soapy water over a black-haired wizard in the center of the arc. Charge! Yelled the stone prince and threw one of his buckets at the nearest wizards. Take that, you cheats, said Alienora, dumping the first of her buckets over another. What? This is impossible, said one of the wizards indignantly as he began to melt. Too bad, Cimmerian said, throwing her second load of water at the next to last wizards. What were you throwing that? Morwen said to the stone prince, who had sloshed his second bucket over the 5th wizard with such enthusiasm that water had sprayed in all directions. "Sorry," the prince apologized. "Is that all of them?" "It's the 5 of them that we saw," Simmarine said cautiously. "Then we did it," Eleonora said. "Not quite," Zemnar said, stepping out of the bushes behind Morwen. "You interrupted the spell, of course, but we were nearly finished anyway. As long as the stone remains enchanted, Wrede won't have any trouble getting it all the way to the Vanishing Mountain. Look." He pointed with his staff, and Simmarine saw that 3 dragons, high in the air, were flying steadily towards the mountain. One of them had a long black stone clutched in his claws, and the other 2 appeared to be escorting him carefully at a distance. "Wrede and the 2 judges," Simmarine murmured. Zemnar nodded. "You might as well put that bucket down," he went on, turning to Eleonora. "You can't throw it at me without melting your witch friend here. What's in it, by the way?" "I don't see why we should tell you," Simmarine said as Eleonora set the last of the buckets down. "Because I'm interested, Princess," Zemnar said with an oily smile, "and it will pass the time until the next shift gets here, and I can decide what to do with you." "If you're interested, why don't you take a closer look?" said the Stone Prince, picking up Eleonora's bucket. "Stay where you are," Zemnar commanded. As soon as he spoke, he raised a staff and sidestepped so that Morwen was between him and the Stone Prince. "If you insist." He shrugged, lifted the bucket, and flung the water over Morwen and Zemnar at the same time. "What? No!" Zemnar cried in horror as he began to melt. "Not soap suds! It's demeaning!" "There's a little lemon juice in it, too," Eleonora offered. Zemnar glared at her. He was less than half his normal height and shrinking as they watched him. "Lemon juice? Bah! How dare you do such a thing? I'm the High Wizard of the Society of Wizards." His voice grew fainter and higher as he shrank. "Interfering busybodies! Soap suds! Of all the undignified tricks! You'll be sorry for this! You can't melt a wizard forever, you know! You'll be sorry!" The wizard's voice ceased. All that remained of him was a pile of silk robes and a long wooden staff lying on some damp moss. Eleonora and Simmarine stared for a moment, and then Eleonora turned to the Stone Prince. "I'm glad he's gone," she said, "but how could you melt Morwen just to get to that wizard? But I didn't," the Stone Prince said. "Look." Simmarine and Eleonora turned. Morwen seemed no shorter than usual, though she certainly did look very damp. She had taken off her glasses and was shaking water off them. "Don't just stand there," she said crossly to Simmarine. "Hand me a dry handkerchief." "Just a moment," Simmarine said, checking her pockets. She found the handkerchief that had been wrapped around the magic feathers and handed it to Morwen. Why didn't you melt?" "Clean living," Morwen said as she began to dry her glasses on Simmarine's handkerchief. "I thought as much," the Stone Prince said in a satisfied tone. "Nobody who lives in a house as clean as yours could possibly melt in a bucket of soap suds." "Quite right," Morwen said approvingly. "You have a good head on your shoulders, young man. What's this?" She held up a sharp-edged black pebble. "It's a piece of stone that I found in the caves at Fire and Night," Simmarine said. "Where exactly?" "In the King's Cave," Simmarine said. "Morwen, shouldn't we do something about the spell Zemnar mentioned?" Eleonora was watching the sky, shading her eyes with her hand. "Wrede's nearly halfway to the mountain," she said anxiously. "Good," said Morwen, though neither Simmarine nor Eleonora could tell which of them she was talking to. Eleonora could tell which of them, the witch shook her wet robes and walked over to the patch of dead moss where the wizards had been working. Simmarine followed. In the center of the brown area was a black stone the size of Simmarine's fist. A web of yellow-green light flickered across the smooth surface. "Sloppy," Morwen said. "Very sloppy, though I'm not surprised. Wizards always seem to be dependent on brute force when a little subtlety would be far more effective." She fingered Simmarine's pebble for a moment, then reached out and dropped it on top of the wizard's stone. There was a noise like a great deal of popcorn popping at once, and the light that flickered over the black stone spat yellow and green sparks in all directions. Eleonora jumped and backed away. Simmarine would have liked to do the same, but she did not want to give Morwen a bad impression of her courage, so she stayed where she was. The sparks died, and the flickering light went out. From the sky, high above, came a faint shriek of surprise and rage. Simmarine looked up and saw 3 black specks in the sky. No, not 3, 4. And the 2 escort dragons were swooping to catch the speck, that was column stone, which Warog had just dropped. Cimmerine gave a sigh of relief and looked at Morwen. So much for Warog and the wizard, she said. We didn't even need the fireproofing spell. What did you do? And what happens now? Alienora said. Duck, said Morwen, and threw herself sideways in the bushes. What? Said the Stone Prince, and then he, Cimmerine, and Alienora were engulfed by a blast of flames. The Stone Prince leapt in front of the two princesses, but he was much too late to protect them. Fortunately, the fireproofing spell was still in effect, and neither of them even felt warm, though Alienora lost the ends of her sleeves, and Cimmerine's hemline rose about 6 scorched inches. I knew I shouldn't have said that about the fireproofing spell, Cimmerine muttered. With a wordless snarl and a thunder of wings, Warog landed just in front of the little group. You, he shouted when he saw Cimmerine. I might have known it would be you. Flame shot from his mouth once more, but it was just as useless as the first time. Cimmerine glanced up and saw one of the escort dragons spiraling down to see what was going on. You might as well give it up, Warog, she said, hoping to distract the angry dragon long enough for help to arrive. You can't be king of dragons now. I will tear you limb from limb, Warog raged. Every last one of you. One arm shot out as he spoke, and a shining silver claw snapped down around the Stone Prince's waist. Alienora screamed. Hurry up! Cimmerine shouted at the dragon in the sky. The dragon heard and dove toward them, but he was not fast enough. Warog shoved the Stone Prince into his mouth and bit down hard. An instant later, he howled in pain and spat out the prince and 4 teeth. What is all this? The escort dragon said, landing carefully beside Warog. The clearing was getting rather crowded. A plot to cheat on the test to see who would be the next king of the wizard, Cimmerine said. Warog was in it and a lot of wizards. Are you all right? Alienora asked the Stone Prince, who was just picking himself up. His stone was black in places from the dragon fire, but otherwise he seemed unhurt. More or less, the Stone Prince said, but just look at what the fire did to my clothes. And the dragons put a chip in my sleeve. What am I supposed to do about that? It's not as if I can just change clothes when I get home, you know. That's ridiculous, the escort dragon told Cimmerine. No dragon would cooperate with wizards. I don't see any wizards either. I think you're making it up. Of course you don't see any wizards, Cimmerine said, feeling very cross. We melted them. Melted them? Where do you think those staffs came from? Cimmerine said, pointing to the wizard staff lying in scattered brown puddles. The dragon backed up a pace and sniffed experimentally. It's quite true, Morwen said, poking her head out of the bush, and we would be more than happy to explain the whole thing to your new king as soon as you have one, provided, of course, that you take that maniac away before he burns down the whole enchanted forest. She gestured at Warog. Cimmerine, I really must insist on getting a copy of that fireproofing spell. It will clearly be worth every minute of hunting that will take me to find some hen's teeth, and I may as well get started as soon as I can. Who's that? The escort dragon said. Morwen? That does it. This is too much for me. I'm taking you into custody until the trials are over and the king can sort it all out. Come along. I assume that doesn't belong to me, Warog rumbled. He winced as he spoke. It certainly does, the escort dragon said. I said all, and I meant all. If I'd meant all the humans, I would have said all the humans, or maybe some of you, or you over there, or all you non-dragons, or... Nonsense, Warog interrupted. Don't you know who I am? You're a dragon who caused a ruckus just now for no reason that I can see, the escort dragon replied, and it is my duty and my job to take you into custody. When the trials are over, you can explain it to the king, and if I've done something wrong, well, I'll take what I have coming. And if I haven't, you'll take yours. And, all right, Warog said, but I warn you, you'll regret this. That may be, the escort dragon said with dignity. Right now, though, you're in custody, along with the rest of these people, and you better not go snacking on any of them until things are sorted out. I saw what you did to the Grey One. Did you? Said the Stone Prince. Then what are you going to do about the chip in my sleeve? Tell it to the king, the escort dragon advised. Now off we go, the lot of you. Morwen came cautiously out of the bushes, brushing leaves from her already wet black robe. She stopped and peered at the escort dragon over the top of her glasses. This has not been a good day for anyone's clothes, she said severely. I shall send the cleaning bill to your king. Whatever you want, the escort dragon said impatiently. Come on. Scowling furiously, Warog marched off into the forest. The Stone Prince and Alienora followed, talking in low voices. Morwen paused to pick up the wizard's black rock and Cimmerine's pebble, then went after them. Cimmerine hesitated. "Go on," said the escort dragon. "I will, but I think you ought to know that another batch of wizards is supposed to show up soon," Cimmerine said. Seminar said something about a second shift. I don't know what they can do with the stone that they were using, but I'm sure they'll try something. Wizards always do, the escort dragon said, with a sigh. He studied the wizard staffs that were lying around the clearing with a melancholy air. "All right, I'll send someone back to keep an eye on things as soon as we get to the ford. Whatever's going on here, there certainly were wizards in it, and that's enough for me." "Good," said Cimmerine, "and thank you." She smiled at the startled expression on the dragon's face and started after the others. That's all we're going to read today. Make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to finish the book with chapter 15, in which the dragons crown a new king and Cimmerine gets a new job. This has been Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede. It's published by Scholastic, who's been kind enough to let us read it. And I'm Sarah Mari of the Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope I see you tomorrow. Bye!